Good evening and welcome to Tucker Carlson tonight. It was a horrifying scene in Paris today, an island in the middle of the Seine, where Notre Cathedral sits and has for 850 years, a living symbol of Christianity, of France, of Western civilization itself, all but melted down, its steeple toppling on live television. There you have the pictures. The final damage is still being assessed tonight, but it looks to be a near total loss. The interior of the cathedral, famously called the forest, 800-year-old timbers ignited like a tinderbox. Trace Gallagher has been on this story all day, and he joins us tonight in the studio.
And the reason they call it the forest, Tucker, is because 52 acres of timber some 800 or 900 years ago, that's what it took to actually build this thing. 800 years ago, and the timber, of course, has been drying for that long. So when this thing went up, it was a tinder box for all intents and purposes. It happened a little after 6 p.m., right? We're talking about Paris time. A little after 6, you could see some of the smoke coming up out of the cathedral, and people were wondering what the smoke was. And then minutes later, you look at the pictures, you could see the flames, you could see the smoke had gotten much darker. The firefighters say they were actually there as soon as the workers, because they're now in the process of renovating, or they were in the process of renovating the spire. The workers were there, and the firefighters were trying to bring them out. But the problem was there were no resources, which is odd because the people who were on the scene said it was unbelievable that you had this thing burning, and you see that Notre Dame is actually on an island, and there's a river that runs right by the back of the property. So the wonderment was, why wasn't there any water being pushed or being pumped on this thing? And for some reason, for 30 or 40 minutes, they struggled to be able to get some water on this. They actually considered using helicopters like we see in wildfires out west to dump on there, but the concern then would be, would it be enough water to put the fire out, and would it do more damage? They also thought about bringing in these tankers, which we also see in firefights out west, but the question is, that's not an exact science, and then you run the risk of having these big tankers come through and dropping this water and doing damage to not only the buildings, but maybe some of the people who were around there. So by the time they got there, all this wood, the entire cathedral was going down, and they were saying later they had no idea if they were going to be able to put the fire out, period. Tucker.
And to be clear, it's a loss. We don't build things like Notre Dame Cathedral anymore. We can't. And so this is, you know, the elimination of a finite number of places like this. So the two things that, just to be clear from your report, the two things at this hour that we really don't know, and maybe we should, is how did this happen exactly? Right. There's some speculation, but we don't actually know if that's right. And,
we don't.
And we're not really sure why. We always want to give firefighters the benefit of every doubt. But we don't know why the response seemed delayed, do we?
No, and the firefighters are pushing back, saying they were there. They were there just minutes after that, and witnesses have now said, yes, they were, in fact, on scene trying to get people out. What we don't know is, why weren't the resources there? Right. Why didn't they have the trucks? Why didn't they have the tankers? Why didn't they have the water from the Seine that was being pumped on this? We don't know. What we do know is that there was renovation going on up top. We know there was construction in that very area where the fire started. We don't know if that was the cause at all, but we know that one could potentially lead to the other. We also know that if you look at these pictures now inside, you're talking about, if you've ever been inside this amazing structure, you've got 76 of those paintings. They're 4 feet tall. Yes. They're everywhere in the ceilings. You have the rose windows, which are magnificent in their own right. Those are gone. The organ is gone. And now the concern is, we lost the artwork, we lost the organ, we lost a lot of the heritage. Did we also lose the artifacts? And by that we mean, did they lose the things that were in the vaults below, meaning not only the architectural plans of the cathedral itself, but also some of the early architectural plans of the city of Paris.
The city of Paris.
They were locked in there. And that's the question now, is how much of the heritage did they actually lose in this fire, because it really was devastating. And devastating for Catholics because it's Good Friday. It's Easter Sunday. The two holiest days on the Christian calendar. Hundreds of thousands would have celebrated Mass this weekend.
Horrifying. Trace Gallagher, thank you very much for that.
Sure.
What an account. Well, the fire you've just been watching is in some ways a metaphor, maybe, for the broader decline of Christianity in Europe. That decline has been swift and full of unintended consequences. Mark Stein has been studying this